Up until now, I've been reviewing episodes of The Middle individually, but it's taken quite a while to get through them and I want to watch them more quickly, so I've decided to rewatch them in batches. I'm probably going to talk about them in groups of 4 going forward. I might review the Pam Staggs episode individually because Kirstie Alley, but other than that, probably going to group them together. And I have to say, the latest batch, Season 2 episodes 11, 12, 13 and 14, are pretty decent, so I will go through each of the episodes in turn, talk a little bit about what happens, and share some highlights and any negatives or criticisms, if there are any. So the first one, Season 2, Episode 11, Taking Back the House, is directed by Barnett Cowan, and this starts with Brick taking over the bed, establishing the main narrative that the kids are wanting everything, demanding everything, and we have a change in attitude from Frankie when the kids all wanted different takeouts and they're demanding everything, and she realises enough is enough. And what I like about this is that Frankie had the idea to take back the house. She shared the idea with Mike, and it was Mike who told the kids that this is what's going to happen. Immediately, they had this united front. They were both working together on this, and I really liked it, and Mike didn't even need to be told to join this. He just automatically said, yes, I will side with my wife. We're taking back the house. And I rather liked that. And we have some great moments of Frankie just taking back the house. And Sue, I think it was Sue, came into the living room, or the family room, and asked what's happened. And Frankie had changed things. And she says that, I'm not embarrassed to have people over anymore. And then very quickly added to Mike, don't worry, we're not having people over, which I rather enjoyed. And they're having pizza, but they got the pizza that they wanted. And we have we have this amazing quote from Sue, but the zebra has pineapple on it. I won't give the full context, but it was a kind of wildebeest analogy, and I liked it. I found it to be very funny. And the kids then have a united front. I think maybe they could have done a little bit more with this, but we do see the kids working together a little bit, and Axel suggests just playing along with it, but it was easier said than done. Brick, however, is really enjoying himself, as Frankie wasn't taking him to the library, so he had to use the internet to look up information, and he's discovered this whole world of knowledge online. I think we got enough humour out of that. I quite enjoyed that. And Frankie ends up getting Nancy involved and some of the other parents, and suddenly they're all taking their lives back. And at the end of the episode, Frankie realises that actually they do the things the kids want because they love their children and they want them to be happy. And she does end the episode, though, basically begging this other parent to not give in while her child is still young. And I think the main takeaway from this episode is that it's all about balance. In life, you can't just have everything your own way, speaking to the children, but also parents are there to help their children and be there when they need them. And actually, if you want to do that for them, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you love them. And I think we have some nice messages here. Quite a funny episode. Ultimately, really thoroughly enjoyed it. I noted down no negatives whatsoever. Season 2, Episode 12, The Big Chill, is directed by Leisha Lachemel, and we start with Frankie churning butter. At least I'm pretty sure she was churning butter. And this is then the rest of the episode is a flashback to establish how we got there. Frankie is in a mall, in a department store, and she buys this eye cream, this teeny tiny pot of eye cream for $20. However, when she shows she shows Sue the tiny pot of cream and basically said, don't tell your father I spent $20 on this. Sue looks at the bottom of the cream. It was $200. Frankie didn't realise. Needless to say, if anybody had spent that amount of money on that tiny product, I think I'd lose my mind too. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. Axel is also looking after this mechanical doll for health class. He calls it Little Brick, and I did enjoy the moment where the baby is crying and crying, and then it stops, and Brick is in Sue's room because the baby's crying, and it's quiet, and Sue decides to throw a shoe at the wall to make it cry. I liked that she was winding Axel up. I thought it was pretty funny. Frankie then does the right thing, and I like the fact that the episode didn't drag this out too much. Frankie did the right thing and told Mike, and on the one hand, I absolutely give credit to Mike for not losing his cool. He acknowledged that Frankie made a mistake. She didn't do this on purpose. But at the same time, it's kind of eerie because it's therefore unclear how he really feels. And I almost wanted him to shout at Frankie and release that anger because he's going around quite sinisterly, actually, without revealing how he truly feels, and it's a bit unnerving. We then have a hole in the wall, and this is because Sue threw the shoe. And she's getting the manual. They're going to have to take off the loose pieces of spackle and then patch it up. And she walks into the room and Brick just says, they're all loose pieces, as the hole is like 20 times the size it was. So I rather enjoyed that. We then cut back to Frankie churning butter. I'd actually forgotten it. By this point in the episode, I'd kind of forgotten that that's where we'd started off. And it turns out she got the job at the Heritage Village to make extra money to make up the $200. And I rather enjoyed that. Quite a lot in the scenes down there I really liked as well. We're then back at the house. Frankie is wearing her Heritage Village dress, rocking a fragment of the mechanical baby. And Mike said something that I thought was really interesting. And he said, I'm not mad you made a mistake. I'm mad because we can't afford to make a mistake. Which I thought was really interesting. And I think it's also a great message there because often we're angry, just people in general, we are angry about things and we think we're angry about one thing, but in actual fact, it's something else that's making us angry. And that would have been the case here. Had Mike shown his anger at Frankie, he would have seemed like he was angry that she made a mistake. But as he said there, he's angry that they can't even afford to. Now, $200 is in some ways a lot of money, but at the same time, it doesn't go very far. And they can't even accidentally lose $200. Well, accidentally, but also intentionally. And I thought that was really interesting. And he said, and I quote, we've got to have 4 jobs just to stay poor. Isn't that the painful reality for so many families? It's not just about making ends meet. You have many jobs. I know a lot of people are in this situation, and you're still in a state of poverty in a lot of cases, and it's a reality for a lot of people. And I think the episode did a really good job of highlighting that this is quite a common situation, unfortunately. And I think Mike handled it really, really well. Plus the lesson there about why am I angry? The next time you feel angry, ask yourself, why am I angry? Sometimes we are angry at the thing we're angry at, but sometimes we're actually angry at ourselves and we're displacing that anger. So some good moments there. Nice to see Sue and Brick working together to try and fix the hole. Brick dropped an egg in it at one point and it just went from bad to worse, and I found it to be very, very funny. So ultimately, The Big Chill was a decent episode. We then come to Season 2, Episode 13, Super Sunday, directed by Paul Lazarus, and we have several parts of the episode. It is Square Dancing with the Stars, which is the same day as Super Bowl Sunday. That's a square dancing competition that Brad wants to take part in with Sue. Nice to see Brad. Really enjoyed their rehearsals. Definitely found that to be very entertaining. Mr. Ellert is taking Frankie to a management seminar. Why? Well, we come back to that in a moment. Meanwhile, though, Brick is actually passionate about the Super Bowl. And this is because he's learning facts, he's memorizing this information. And I love the fact that it shows that even though Brick might not be directly interested in the Super Bowl, he does love learning information. And that's a way for him and Mike to bond. And I thought that worked really, really well. We're then in the camper with Mr. Ellert. And he says to Frankie, there's no seminar. It was a little bit suspenseful. It takes us a couple of minutes to find out exactly what's going on here. And it turns out he has a colonoscopy. And he needs Frankie to drive him back after the procedure. Needless to say, Frankie is very, very annoyed. But we get quite a moving moment. And I'll come back to that in a moment. We then have the time for the Super Bowl. And Brick talked the entire time. So all of Mike's friends left because they don't want to listen to Brick. And I feel like Mike could have done a little bit more with this. Axel then comes into the house and Axel was feeling left out because Brick was now Brick appeared to be the favourite son, the one Mike was spending time with. And I feel like Mike could have done a bit more to say, well, my friends have left, but my two sons are here. Let's gather around and watch the Super Bowl. I think they could have made a bigger thing out of that. But nevertheless, I still enjoyed it. And Sue does a great dance, great performances here. She did a great dance at the square dancing with the stars, because it didn't really go the way that they wanted it to. But Sue had a lovely upbeat spirit, as always. And then Mr. Albert said something that I thought was brilliant, because Frankie quits. She quits, well, she'll quit once she's driven Mr. Ellert home. And she basically negotiates a better deal so that she stays with the company. And Mr. Ellert says to her, and excuse the double negative, but he says, you don't need no seminar. That's a huge compliment for Frankie. He's basically just said, you don't need a management seminar. You can do this already. And I thought that was really sweet. For Mr. Ellert, that was a really nice thing to say. So, all things considered, I thought Super Sunday was a pretty good episode as well. And then we come to the last one, Season 2, Episode 14, Valentine's Day 2, directed by Lee Shamel. And I know I haven't had any negatives or criticisms this far, but I actually do with this one. It's not a huge thing, it's not a big deal, but there is something that I think could have worked a little bit better. This is, of course, set at Halloween. And Sue is trying to find the boy she kissed on the church hayride from last Halloween when she was dressed as a crayon. Also has a crush, and Axel is dating somebody, and he asks Frankie to help him pick out a Valentine's Day gift. He's even willing for her to go to the mall with him, which is a big deal. But the more Frankie learns about her, she's 19, she's got a tattoo, she's got pink hair. Based on that description, is not the kind of person Frankie wants Axel to date, but she's loving spending time with him, so she's trying to not say anything. So that was interesting. We actually get to meet her later on. She's called Vanessa, and yeah, the reaction was pretty interesting. With regards to Brick, Michael is actually volunteering, not willingly, but he's volunteering with Brick's class because they're doing Valentine's Day crafts, and he kind of told Autumn's mother that Brick had a crush on Autumn, and Mike kind of puts his foot in a bit more. Brick wrote an anonymous Valentine's Day card for Autumn, and because Brick had told Mike, you can't tell Autumn I like her, he then told Autumn that the card wasn't from Brick when she asked. So now some other boy in the class is taking credit, and Brick's lost all hope with Autumn. So Mike made things go from pretty bad to pretty worse, but it was quite entertaining and definitely very sweet. We then finish up with Sue, and as I said, Sue is looking for the boy she had her kiss with at the hayride, and it just so happens that there's a new boy at the school. Could it be the boy from the hayride? Well, he doesn't seem to remember her, but then Sue dresses up as the crayon again, and the new kid recognises her. His name is Joe, and everything works out in the end. And I don't think that worked very well. It just felt a little too coincidental that Sue was speaking with Carly about how she wished she could find this boy, and then he magically appears. It would have made so much more sense, it would have been so much more believable if Sue hadn't been talking about him, but the new kid arrives, he goes into the office where Sue is helping out, and she sees him, and she recognises him, and that starts her thinking about him. I'm not saying it's unrealistic that Sue was still thinking about him at Valentine's Day. For Sue, I totally believe it, but within the context of the episode, it's a little bit too coincidental that she was thinking about him and he appeared. It would have made so much more sense if she started thinking about him once she saw him in the office and started to wonder, is that him? Does he remember me? I think that would have been a little bit more believable, and it would have made a much better episode. But nevertheless, it's still a good episode. And all things considered, this batch is really good. If I had to rank the episodes, I don't know if I'll do this going forward, but I might. If I had to rank them, it might actually be in the order. I think I'd go with, I'd say Taking Back the House and The Big Chill are probably combined, and then Super Sunday, and then Valentine's Day 2. So yeah, pretty much in the order that I watched them. Looking forward to watching more of the middle, and for now I'm pleased to say that Season 2 episodes 11, 12, 13 and 14 were all pretty decent.